because it was already stressful enough. It was already a lot of pressure.
Yeah. So you talk about getting direction. Those are kind of the words that they use. And it seems like that's something they pressure you to have. It's like personal revelation, right? I have a feeling that this is the person I'm supposed to marry. So you were kind of pressured into picking a crush or figuring out who your person was. So what was that like for you?
I mean, I don't even know how old I was when I first started saying my own prayers, but they would always encourage us and tell us that in your prayers, you ask the Lord, please help me to find my number one choice and to get direction on marriage. And a lot of the times what they would consider direction is like a dream about somebody. So I remember being about 14 and really considering this guy and being like, I wonder if he's a choice of mine, or I bet he's at least a choice. I wonder if he's my number one choice. And of course I would pray about it. If it's supposed to be him, let me know. Give me direction or whatever. And so like, I have a dream about him one time. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I know who I'm supposed to marry. And then like within a week or so, I have a dream about his brother. And I'm like, well, girls don't live polygamy. So I guess dreams don't mean anything. But they also talk about, this is one thing to keep in mind. They push and tell that the Lord can give you direction through your parents. So for example, if your father comes to you and tells you, I believe you're supposed to marry this person, or even just tells you you're supposed to marry this person. God told me, you're supposed to like believe them. You're supposed to accept that God is giving you direction through another human being, especially your father.
Which is really convenient. It's a really easy way to manipulate someone and be like, well, I got direction. I mean, says every cult leader ever, right?
Yep.
So at this point, you choose your cousin. And I also, actually, let me back up for a second. At 14, I was not making good relationship choices. The fact that they are trying to tell 14-year-old girls, figure out who God wants you to marry, that is bonkers to me. Because what 14-year-old is making any good decisions, let alone deciding who they're going to be with forever? So I just had to point that out. It's a lot of pressure. So you're 16 now. You choose your cousin.
So actually, I didn't choose him until I was 18.
Oh, okay.
While I was 17, I was just about to marry a different cousin. We got engaged. We went as far as like having the meeting with Paul, but my mom didn't approve of it. So we were like, okay, let's put this on the shelf for a minute. We need to get the domestic energy on the same page.
Why do you think your mom didn't approve of it?
I don't know. I think she just, inside her, she just felt like it just wasn't right. But also at that time, there was a lot of pressure. I was getting pressure. My mom was pretty respectful of me, of my wishes. And like, if it came up, then we could talk about it, but she didn't push me about it. But Daniel was, and a lot of the other like adults, they were very pressuring. Like I was in a lot of wedding lines. I had a lot of friends, my sisters and cousins. And so I was in a handful of wedding lines. And for some reason, like half the freaking group of the adults would love to be like, you're next. And like in an excited kind of way. And like, they're always like, I don't know. It's like they're all living through the young kids. Like that's where they get their excitement. So I was getting pressure from my friends too at the time and my sisters. And I had sisters who already had kids. Some of them were already pregnant with their second. Some of them, were just pregnant with their first, but it was coming from all over. And then internally, I was just kind of trying to like put it as like kind of like ride the fence, have it as close, but as far as I could manage given where I was at. And when I did decide to marry or to say yes to the first cousin, I was so sick of the pressure. I was so sick of hearing constantly from my friends, from the adults, that Shanell, you should get married. You should find your number one choice. And so I finally just at that point was like, well, if I say yes, people will stop bugging me about it. And so I said yes. But actually I also had a dream that I was like, this is close enough. It's close enough. So in the dream, I was working at the mine, which I was, and a person from this family, then he like comes and he tells me, he's like picks me up or something. I don't know. I was like falling down on the ground. He like picks me up and he tells me that he's going to take care of me. And in the dream, I remember his face was blurred. I couldn't see his face, but I knew his last name. And it just so happened to be the same last name as the person I did end up marrying. So I was just like, well, this is close enough. This is good enough. People will leave me alone and stop bugging me about it if I just say yes. But after my mom had disapproved and we had our meeting with Paul, then I realized that I didn't actually fully believe he was the one I was supposed to marry. And so that means, like, if he's not the one I'm supposed to marry, I'm not the one he's supposed to marry. So I couldn't follow through with it, or else I would be destroying not just my life, but his life. Is like the way I saw it. And so after that, I just kind of like pushed back a little bit, like more so, pushed back quite a bit. It was like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to listen to it. If anyone comes forward on me, I don't want to know. A lot of people like to say that I was forced to marry my ex. And that's only somewhat true. I say that I didn't choose to get married. I was pushed to get married, but I was able to choose who I married. So saying that I was forced to get married is pretty close to reality, but I wasn't forced to pick that specific guy.
Right.
That one was my choice.
So do you want to talk about your actual relationship once you did get married?
Yeah. Well, frankly, like there were things coming up during the engagement that were red flags. And he was telling me, my dad told me this about your family, and not just like my family, but my mom's family. So I was hearing about how the Hansons are bad, and that Shirley's bad, and she doesn't respect Daniel, and Shirley's kids don't respect Daniel, and that's bad. And also him telling his son to like encourage me to have a better relationship with Daniel and to like be his friend and whatever. So just simply hearing some of the stuff that was being said was, red flag enough. But he didn't get abusive until it was at least a few months later. I want to say it was like 3 or 4 months, like the first time he like pushed to force himself on me. And then I slapped him, and he got really offended about that. And he was like, "You slapped me." And I was like, "Well, I told you no, and you were pushing yourself on me." And it was started then, but didn't go all the way. And it wasn't much longer that like I wasn't able to hold him off anymore. But he got abusive. He was verbally abusive, but the physical abuse took, I don't know, like a month or two later. I don't know. It seems like pretty quick, but also at the same time, the signs were there. Anyways, so when he got physically abusive, the first time he picked me up and he like threw me against the wall and like into the doorway. And by the end of the day, he apologized. And then the next day, he went to work, and I didn't work that day. So I spent the whole day just thinking about how am I going to talk to him about this? How am I going to sit him down and tell him that's not okay? So when he came home from work, then I sat him down. I was like, you cannot treat me like that. That's not okay. That is abuse. And I'm not going to be married to somebody like, well, at the time I said Job, because one of my half brothers, it was well known within the group that he was beating his wives. And by then he had already had 2 of his 4 wives leave him for the abuse. So, he apologized again. He promises it's never going to happen again. And I let him know, well, it better not, because I'm not going to be this kind of wife. I'm not going to do it.